everyone, welcome to day 2 of Kenya. Today was not a fast-paced day, but it was a very packed day. There was a lot that happened today. I ended up going to bed around 9:30 last night. I woke up shortly before 6 o'clock, like I was ready to go before any of my alarms went off, which was pretty nice. I went down to breakfast and I ended up sitting with some people from the tour. Breakfast was a buffet. There was only the one restaurant open, which was good because it was the only restaurant where I knew where it was. It was interesting just to look around and see what the different foods were. I picked up some foods that I'd never seen before. There was pawpaw fruit, which I'd come across in like my Duolingo Swahili lessons, and I had no idea what it was. Now that I've tried it, it's like a bland mango that has the texture of a watermelon. I picked up something that's kind of like a triangular puffed shape of bread. I thought it was stuffed, but it was empty when I bit into it. I also had some plain yogurt to help with digesting the food. I was not a fan of the plain yogurt, but there wasn't that much of it. But I also had like this berry smoothie thing too, which was nice. And there was some watermelon juice at the buffet. And there were also some pastries. They had peanut butter at the buffet, which peanut butter is my comfort food. I was super excited to see that. And like I was just talking with 2 other people from the tour group there and just enjoying the meal. I went back up. I prepared for the day. We were to meet our tour guide at the lobby at 8:30 in order to leave at 8:35. And that's when I showed off all the stuffed animals I brought to the tour group, because we just happened to be at a place with a table. They all loved the stuffed animals. It's like I know I'm with the right group of people because they found the idea of me bringing the stuffed animals on safari or just around to take pictures of it just as exciting as I did. The tour guide basically asked like, can you auction one off or whatnot? My plan all along was to give the other stuffed animals to the people that I was traveling with, and including the tour guide, so she doesn't have to buy it from me. We all ended up meeting relatively early, so by like 8:35 we went on the bus. We took a tour of Nairobi with the bus, and because it was Sunday, we were actually able to take a little bit of a longer tour and not get stuck in traffic quite as much, and we saw a lot of places. There was a lot of information given to us that I'm having trouble remembering it all now. But we drove by some government buildings. We were actually not allowed to take pictures of the government buildings, which I'm sure was their version of security. The bus driver was really nervous that we were taking pictures, but no one was taking pictures when we were told not to. We drove by some markets. We drove by at least 2 markets, and we drove by an area where with like the people who craft the scrap metal. I remember there was one part where they just pointed down the street and they said there was a market there and you could just see a mass of people. And the only time I remember seeing a mass of people like that is at a sports stadium. I haven't actually seen a mass of people like that anywhere else. And it's like, wow, it's not, or a photograph. It's like, wow, I can't believe I'm seeing this with my own eyes, yeah. All around Nairobi, they had people just on the sidewalks area, well, when there were sidewalks, just like on the walkway areas where they just laid out their blanket and was selling stuff, and they were allowed to do that. And I mean, if you do that in the States, they're going to assume you're a beggar. They don't allow that in the States, and it's just interesting to look at an activity like that and just go like, oh wait, I'm looking at this with the American perspective. Let me just switch this off and try to understand it from their point of view. Also in the markets, they had these wagons. It's basically like a wagon that instead of hitching to like a truck or a horse, like a human is actually pulling it along. I didn't take any pictures of that because there were lots of humans around it, and I don't necessarily want to film humans without their consent or like focus on humans without their consent. So pretty much like other videos that I do, I don't really film other human beings unless I have their express permission. So if you see like the humans in any of the videos here, it's more just like incidental, like it just happened because they were filming. Like I was filming something that was there. Anyway, it turns out like when people buy, like basically people buy things from the market and then they hire one of these like wagons to pull their product along, the thing that they just bought. And it's actually cheaper for them to do it than to bring it on the bus, which is their other option, because Kenyans, like a lot of them, their main method of transportation is walking. They'll go like 6 or 7 miles to walk the product home or walk the product where it needs to go. And they'll do this day after day after day. It's a lot of hard work. You're basically just like moving it along. It's a huge expense of human labor, but it's what they have available. After we told about the wagons, we actually came across one wagon in the road. They literally took up a whole lane like a car would take up, these wagons, and the bus driver just like went around it instead of getting stuck behind the guy. The roads are not on a grid. I don't know what they are, but there are a lot of roundabouts for a city. I felt like we were taking so many turns. Like, we were pointing out a lot of architecture buildings. They pointed out the Macmillan Library to us. There's a story about lions, but I don't quite remember the whole story. There were lions that were taken from a religious building, and then they disappeared for a while, and then they showed up on the libraries. They think Teddy Roosevelt was involved with the taking of the lions. I am missing some serious gaps in that story. But I remember it was entertaining when I heard it, because from what I know of Teddy Roosevelt, he was an aggressive human being, and that completely falls in character with what I think of Teddy Roosevelt. We also, like, on our way to the museum that we were going to, we drove by a neighborhood that our tour guide called a ghetto. There are people who do not have a lot, and we also drove by a set of slums. I forget the exact name, but another moniker was the Chocolate City. But basically, it's only a square mile wide, and they don't know the exact amount of people who are living on it, but it could be up to 1 million people living in that square mile, which, that is insane. That's not a lot of space, and that's a lot of people. If there's like 1 million people living in a square mile, there is no such thing as privacy. I'm sure of it. Lots of people end up living there in order to like help survive in the city, and they did mention like the rent in a couple places of Nairobi, and the rent is lower here than it would be back where I live in the States. Like, the expensive buildings is just like a baseline back where I live. They also point out a lot of religious buildings. So they pointed out the Hindu temple that we saw, like it was the largest Hindu temple in Africa, I think it was. We saw a mosque. We saw a cathedral. We ended up driving by a community for Carmelite nuns. I don't remember seeing a synagogue, but there was mention of Judaism. Like, Nairobi is a very diverse place religion-wise. There's a lot of belief systems that are all living very cooperatively in Nairobi. We also saw the Kenyatta building. I didn't realize that was like the symbol of Nairobi, but it is. And it was an impressive building. Also, there was a moment in time when, like, Kenya used to be a British colony. There was like a moment in time when the Union Jack went down and the Kenyan flag went up. They actually have a statue commemorating the spot where the Kenyan flag went up for the first time. And I thought that was a very meaningful gesture, a very nice touch. There were also like a lot of speed bumps on the road as we were getting closer to our destination. But the environment was like very lush. There were green trees everywhere. And then we pulled into the Karen Blixen Museum. Karen Blixen was part of a rich Danish family, and she ended up going to Africa to marry with another member of like Danish nobility. She became a baroness because of her marriage. She and her husband came to Kenya to run a dairy farm, but her husband went first and then got talked out of running the dairy farm and instead trying to grow coffee. So she ended up running like some coffee fields. But because of the elevation, coffee did not grow well, so she just did not have a very good plot. Apparently she stayed there for like 17 years with like a year break because her husband, who also happened to be her half cousin, happened to have given her syphilis, and she had to go and take care of herself before she could continue living in Africa. After she had her experience, she wrote a book about her experiences, and that's what became the movie Out of Africa. Like, the book was also called Out of Africa, but she then went on to write some other things, and she was also a very accomplished painter. She was ending up living in what was the most expensive building built in Kenya at the time. The building is now owned by the Kenyan government, and it's been turned into a museum. So the first thing that actually like stood out is when we got off the bus, there were loads of butterflies everywhere. I mean, there were just so many butterflies. You could still see like the surrounding area. It wasn't like a cloud of butterflies so much, but it was just like a very nice sprinkling. And the only time I've ever seen that many butterflies in one place have been like man-made places, like a conservatory that's part of a museum. And it's like my first time seeing that many butterflies in the wild. They were mostly white, although they also had like black and brown markings, and they weren't all the same. And they kept flitting around like very quickly. It's very hard to take a picture of them, although I was trying to do video, but it turns out they're like other wild animals. If you move very slowly, you don't spook them and you can get really close. We ended up meeting up with our tour guide right away. His name is Sakis. He did a very good job. He was only working there for 2 months, but he was very professional and he was very knowledgeable. He was able to answer most of the questions that we put to him, and he had a lot of information that he had memorized. He was not looking at cards while doing it, and he was just going on the route. It really reminded me of my tour guide job that I had several years ago. Basically, they started the tour out on like the field in front of the house. They had a bunch of chairs set up for us, so while he gave a lot of the background information, we were able to listen to it. And I remember watching the Out of Africa movie just before like coming on this trip and not being thoroughly impressed with it. But now that I've actually been to the place, I am more impressed with the story now. There's definitely more dimensions about it that the movie itself did not make very clear, at least on the first viewing. There was like one point where it's like the front porch itself, I just felt a certain connection to the front porch that I didn't really feel to the rest of the house. I'm not sure why, but it turns out the front porch itself was actually part of the movie. It's the only part they actually filmed there. The rest of it was on a set somewhere else that was made to imitate the house, so that way they could like work around the cameras and whatnot, because you can't alter the building because it's like a protected site. But then we went into the house. We weren't allowed to take photos in the house. It was a very small house, comparatively speaking. So there was a living room, or kind of like a place where she worked, like a study, then like a living room, her bedroom, her lover's bedroom, which it was the husband's until the husband moved out, and then her lover came and took over the bedroom. And then a bathroom. And there was like a serious metal tub in that bathroom. It looked rough and uncomfortable. Then the kitchen was separate from the house, so like it wouldn't catch on fire, but the kitchen was very small as well. There was an iron on the stove. It never really occurred to me that the iron and the stove would be like the same thing. Yeah, also she had a telephone in one of the rooms, but she never got to use the telephone because there was no electricity and no phone lines. So it's more just like a decoration, but they also had like the cuckoo clock, and they showed the gramophone along with like the actual albums that she was using. While Karen Blixen was alive, she ended up selling a lot of her stuff to her friends when she needed to raise money, but when her friends realized that there was going to be a Karen Blixen museum, they ended up giving the stuff back so that way people could honor her memory. After that, we went to the coffee factory. There was a coffee factory nearby, and we got to see the place where they processed the coffee plant to become like the grounds that would become roasted. It's like the coffee goes through this machine that like dehusks them or something like that. And then after that, it goes to a place where it gets steamed for 24 hours. Like after it got steamed and I think it like took some of the excess water out maybe. They were sun-dried for like 3 days or 72 hours. Also on the way to the coffee factory, there was like a nice little wooded grove that we could walk through, and I just love walking through little wooded groves like that when it's like a wooden tunnel. So cool. Unfortunately, one of the other ladies of the group did trip, and there was some concern for a moment to make sure that she was all right. As far as we know, she is all right. There are also lots of roots in the ground of that area. And the coffee factory, there were a bunch of hyraxes there. There like suddenly the tour guide went silent and was like starting to speak in a whisper so that way we wouldn't bother the animals. There were like 2 of them. I've never seen that animal before. I didn't even know that animal existed. And they were just like these cute little rodents, and it turns out they live in the coffee factory. They just live there all the time. They're protecting their home, and they were like staring at us. They were like moving. It's just like, yeah, cool, let's just interact. Oh yeah, the Karen Blixen Museum actually had plants that were planted by Karen Blixen. There was a palm tree that was planted there when Karen first moved to the estate, and it has been growing, and it's been there for like over 100 years. It's just impressive that it's still there. And there's only the one that on the estate they can't really share. Palm trees are also different genders, and there's only one tree with the one gender. So they can't pollinate, so they just keep splitting. So it's like a 5-pronged tree now. They also showed us the oldest tree on the property is like over 120 years old. But it's like nice that there's still connection to the person like by the tree that she planted. We had a chance to shop at the gift store. There were also 2 different local artists who were selling stuff. I was kind of just looking at it, but I didn't spend too much time because one of the people was starting to follow me around to show me the work. It's like, come look at the work and like pick this up, look at it. And negotiation works if you have a willing buyer and a willing seller. And in that scenario, I was not feeling like a willing buyer. I was not in the mood to buy anything at that moment in time, unfortunately, even though the work itself was amazing. It was top tier craftsmanship, but I just didn't really have the desire to buy anything at that moment. There's also a washroom there, which I was curious to see what the washroom was like. And as far as I see so far, most of the toilets that I've been seeing in Kenya are toilets that I would expect to see. Of course, most of the toilets I've seen have been in the hotel, but the ones by the museum, it was like a typical Western toilet. They actually did have toilet paper and they did have soap as well, so everything was covered. I did end up reapplying the sunscreen while I was there at the Karen Blixen Museum because the sun was strong. After we all went back on the bus, we took a ride back to the hotel and we decided to have lunch at the hotel if we wanted lunch. And then just to prepare for the class that's happening at 3 o'clock. So we got back at the hotel like 12:30. I was super hungry. I was ready for a meal, and it turns out other people were ready for a meal too. I originally went into the thing going like, do I just sit down? It's taking me a little bit of time to figure out exactly what the cultural norms are for entering the restaurant. Like, is this a bar? Is this a la carte? How does this all work? I found someone else from the tour and I joined her, and then we joined the couple that was there, and then we just had like a lively lunch. We had a choice of the a la carte menu or the buffet. And I looked at the menu and I looked at the buffet, and then I saw the station at the buffet that made me go like, I want the buffet. So they had like a build your own pasta situation. It's like a stir fry. So there are two ladies there, and basically you told them what pasta you wanted, you told them what vegetables you wanted, you picked out the meat choices like beef, chicken, and salmon, and I went for salmon, which is something I don't usually do. They boil the pasta right then and there. They also cook the salmon right then and there. They like throw in the vegetables, and the person that was making mine like also pulled a couple other things from like the choose section that I didn't necessarily choose to put in there, but I trusted her judgment because she knows what these things taste like. She knows what tastes good. And when I brought it back to the table, it tasted very, very good. There was also like soy sauce. Like I saw a bottle, it's like, oh, what's that sauce? And then it was just soy sauce. It's interesting, like looking at the menus of the stuff here, there's a very huge Indian influence with the Indian foods. I was also given this drink. I don't really know what the drink was, but it was red and it was tangy, and I enjoyed it. It's like I also had some dessert too. I found some cake and I found like this fruit smoothie thing. That was the best. There was also a pink marshmallow. Like I don't typically see marshmallows that are pink, but it was like, oh, a bit strange. And it was a different texture than the white marshmallow. There's also like a fondue station, so I tried some of the fondue. It was like a very lively conversation with lunch, and we were very close to the live music. I would have hoped for the live music to go down a couple decibels. I always feel like live music is a little bit too loud, unfortunately, even though I usually appreciate the music. But they did do a good job. It was like a nice, pleasant music to listen to. And I was still able to hear the people that I was talking with. We ate outside by the pool. From there, I had like about an hour before the class, so I went back up to my room to find housekeeping was currently taking care of my room. Like all the sheets were off my bed. So it's just like, well, hi. I wasn't just going to leave my room. I mean, it was just a place where I could relax, but I also wasn't going to get in the guy's way. So I just sat down at the desk area and I undid my spindle and I read a little bit off my phone, and then I read part of a book. After he left, I read some more part of the book, and I was able to take off my shoes and get set up. And then at 3 o'clock, we had a knitting class. So with this trip came a pattern exclusive to the trip with promises of being taught by the knitting designer who wrote the pattern on the trip. And I was super excited about it. Most of us was there. The only person who wasn't there was the husband of one of the people. Like even our tour guide was there, even though she didn't have any knitting of her own, but she was just interested to see us all like work. Yeah, it was a very interesting thing. Like there are some explanations of how different things worked and just some easygoing chat about exact what was with the pattern, like what different things meant. And there was also some like chatter just related to knitting in general, even not related to knitting, but everyone chose such good colors. Like we all had different colors for the thing. But also what was cool was with the pattern, the designer Tanis, she actually created 3 different samples of the shawl just in order to try like different yarn types. So there's like one that was just 2 solid colors, and then there was one that was a solid color and a gradient, so like the yarn kind of changed throughout, and then there was like a solid color and a variegated yarn. And like I saw pictures of these all in the patterns because they all show up in the patterns. But the picture, it was a nice enough picture, but I was much more impressed with the knitted shawl in person. There's one that was like a white and brown color, and the brown became warmer in person. Like it just seemed to glow. So I was able to make some good progress. This is my shawl so far. Oh, that's the wrong side. This is the right side right here, and it's a very nice mindless knit. Like, we have an I cord like right here that's going to go through the whole piece apparently, and apparently each row is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But also, it just felt really, really good to knit today. I needed to knit today. And now that we've got it started, it's going to be easier just to take it going forward and just keep on going on. Also, I knew that I didn't pack scissors, but I didn't realize I was going to need scissors for my roving, and one of the other ladies offered to let me use her scissors, and so I was able to like cut the roving into like the lengths that I want them to be, so that way I can just like work the little bit that I want to work for the trip. After that, people were making plans for what to do. The class itself was 2 hours long, and some people were going to go for a swim, and it's like, yeah, let's go for a swim. So we just decided like an hour from then, and well, I don't need an hour to get ready to go swimming. So I spent another half hour there with some of the other people who stayed behind, and we were all just like taking some time just to knit, and there was like more conversation too, and it was very interesting. And then after that, I ended up preparing to go to the pool. I was the first one from the group to make it to the pool, although there was like another contingent of the group that was going to go to dinner, and they weren't sure whether I was joining them or not, so they were waiting in the lobby for me, only to find out that I wasn't joining them. And it's like, while I feel bad that they were waiting for nothing, it's also very nice to have the fact that people were waiting for me to join their company. Like, it's just like a nice fuzzy feeling, like, oh yeah, people like me. It's like, people like to be liked, yeah. But then I went to the pool, and I got the towel a lot quicker today. I just found someone who had a name tag and just asked him directly. Like, about 4 other people joined me in the pool. There wasn't as much like swimming around that I typically do. It was more just like staying in one place and having a conversation type of thing. But when you're in a pool, you can contort your body into all sorts of weird shapes because the water's supporting you. It's like most of the time you can't really be horizontal when you have a conversation with somebody else, but in a pool you can do it. Although there were like lots of people doing laps and doing laps diagonally. There are also a lot of ibis. I don't know that if there's a plural for that or not, but it's interesting. Just like, I could only really see silhouettes of the ibis because, I mean, my glasses were off. I couldn't really see far away, but I could see like the little like motion going like this as they're walking, which was kind of cute. There's also like one ibis that's away from the crowds, and it's like, is he a social outcast? Are the other ones bullying him? But when the other ones went near him, he just ended up walking away. It's like, well, maybe maybe that one's antisocial. Also, in general, the president of Poland is in the hotel right now. We're not sure why, but we were told that security may be up because we are hosting a foreign dignitary because this is a nice hotel. So, yeah, there was that. And then after the pool, we ended up deciding to go to dinner because Kenyans have dinner later than Americans do. They're more like Spain in that way. Like, dinner usually starts like around 7:45. We decided to eat a la carte because, in my case, I'd eaten the buffet for 2 different meals. I didn't want to do like a full day streak, especially knowing that breakfast is going to be another buffet. We had some lively conversation. The food was very, very good. We saw a salamander and we saw a cockroach. The salamander was much more welcome than the cockroach, but we all got pasta dishes and we got like various drinks. It was like a long wait between the various meals because like it was long just to wait for the meal, and we all wanted dessert. It took a long time to get dessert. Food was good. I had like a pasta with prawns in it, and it was like a sauce there, and I had some water, and for dessert I had the banana crumble. Lots of us had like the same thing, so like 3 of us had like the prawn meal, and when it came to dessert, I think 4 of them had like the sticky chocolate pudding, which was basically like a tower of chocolate like that tall. One of the ladies ordered the fruit infusion. Like, there was like drink section, it said fruit infusion, and they'd forgotten about her, and she didn't get it until she'd almost finished her meal. But then like it turns out it was a tea. She thought it was more like the juices that we saw at breakfast. And then it came with honey, and then a lot of us just tried like the different honey. Like the honey that was different, and one of the ladies had like a soda, and she let me try some of her soda. It's like a bitter lemon soda, and it was an interesting taste. We went to dinner at 7:15, and then we didn't finish until 9:30, so there were plans to knit in the lobby after supper, but since we have to leave the hotel by 7:45 tomorrow, it didn't seem like that was happening anymore. So that was my day. It's been a very packed day. And then when I came back to my room, I found out that room service had been in here for a second time because things were different. There were lots of things. Like, they gave me slippers, and there's like stuff for room service and laundry, and they put this thing on my nightstand. I don't know what it is. It might be like a coaster because I see like a drink ring here, but I'm not sure because it's also velvet. It's like they gave me a mini pool table without the balls or the stick, and I don't really know what it is. Anyway, tomorrow we have another packed day ahead of us, and I still have to do some spinning. So I think I'm going to take care of whatever is itching me at the moment, and then head off to bed to prepare for tomorrow.